to make sure that the landlords do pass on, of course, the payments they receive. And if they don't, then of course there is a way of redressing that by going looking at gov.uk.
We're a Hobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. ChargePoint, one of the largest UK charging networks, worried that the government's Levi fund will replicate mistakes of the past where electric charge points were put into lampposts and bollards where people with non-EVs park and therefore lose valuable electric charging. Will the government ensure that the Levi fund is targeted at local authorities' assets like swimming pools and libraries where people will naturally go and therefore increase EV charging capacity?
The Honourable Lady makes a very good point, actually. Of course, where these charge points are blocked, they become useless for EVs. The levy scheme that she references is designed to try to help as many people as possible. And I'll certainly ask my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, to take a closer look at the specific points she raises about those blockages.
Cherie Blair.
Private jets have been in the headlines, Mr. Speaker. Described as incredibly carbon intensive, the recent Department of Transport Commission report suggests the carbon footprint of private jets in the UK is on par with 200,000 people taking a return flight to Hong Kong, and calls for the number of private jets flights to be halved. Will he be having a word with his colleague, the Foreign Secretary, about that?
Private jets almost in the headlines as much as motorhomes, Mr. Speaker. The reality is that to solve this problem, we need sustainable aviation fuel in the shorter term, and that's why the UK has one of the world leading targets of 10% of SAF in our energy mix for jets in just 6.5 years' time.
Question, Alison Thurlow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 13,450 energy bill support scheme vouchers have gone unclaimed in my Glasgow Central constituency. Given the delays that many of my constituents have found in obtaining these vouchers and arguing the case with their energy companies, will she push back the date by which they have to be redeemed, which is currently the 30th of June?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member makes an incredibly important point and gives me the opportunity to make a plea that we must make sure that all of these vouchers are cashed by June the 30th. I would encourage every single member of Parliament in this place to make sure that their constituents who are on prepayment meters and have not cashed in these vouchers, that they do so.
That completes the questions. We'll just let the room clear. All right, take care. You okay? All right. No problem.
Sorry I rambled.
Don't worry. You're all right. Good to see you. All the best. Cheers. We now come to the urgent question. I call the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster to make a statement on the criteria for launching an investigation into a potential breach of the ministerial code.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ministerial code sets out the standards of conduct expected of ministers and how they discharge their duties. The code is the Prime Minister's document. However, ministers are personally responsible for deciding how to act and to conduct themselves in the light of the code, and for justifying their actions and conduct to Parliament and the public. The Prime Minister is the ultimate judge of standards of behaviour expected of a minister and the appropriate consequences of a breach of those standards. Ministers only remain in office for so long as they can retain the confidence of the Prime Minister. The independent adviser on ministers' interests is appointed by the Prime Minister to advise on matters relating to the ministerial code, and as honourable members will be aware, this may include considering matters of ministerial conduct. The independent adviser has published terms of reference which state that if there is an allegation about a breach of the ministerial code and the Prime Minister, having consulted the Cabinet Secretary, feels that it warrants further investigation, he may ask the Cabinet Office to investigate the facts of the case and or refer the matter to the independent adviser on ministers' interests. With regards to the matter concerning the Home Secretary, which has been the subject of recent coverage, the Prime Minister made clear to the House yesterday that he is receiving information on the issues raised. Since returning from the G7, the Prime Minister has met both the independent adviser and the Home Secretary and asked for further information. It is right that the Prime Minister, as the head of the executive and the arbiter of the ministerial code, be allowed time to receive relevant information on this matter. Honourable members will be updated on this in due course.
Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent question, and it is an urgent matter because our constituents expect those who make the rules to follow the rules, especially the minister responsible for upholding the law. There are serious questions to answer following reports that the Home Secretary asked civil servants to organise a private speeding course. So can he start by confirming whether the Home Secretary did or did not ask civil servants for help in this matter? After days of delay, and as the Minister has just pointed out again, the Prime Minister still hasn't decided whether there should be an investigation by his ethics advisor. When can we expect to know what the Prime Minister is thinking on this matter? And when did the Prime Minister be made aware of this issue, when he appointed the Home Secretary or not? The ministerial code is clear that ministers will not use their position for personal gain or ask civil servants to help them in a private matter. Does the Minister condone attempts to use civil service for personal matters, or does he think that any potential breach of this principle should result in an investigation? Reports suggest that officials raised concerns, Mr. Speaker, about the Home Secretary's conduct in emails sent to the Cabinet Office with the Permanent Secretary's full awareness. Officials are said to have been instructed to disregard the request. Was this the case, and on what basis? Furthermore, if the Home Secretary did authorise her special advisor to tell journalists that there was not a speeding penalty, this would surely be classified as the Minister asking officials to breach the Civil Service Code. And does he agree this amounts to a breach of the ministerial code? As ministers know, the Home Secretary has already admitted to breaching the ministerial code by using personal emails to share sensitive government information. So I ask the Minister today, how many strikes before she's out?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Right Honourable Lady has made a number of contentions there, and I'm not, Mr. Speaker, going to get into speculation about the events in question. The Right Honourable Lady will have heard the Prime Minister being very clear yesterday. He was informed of these issues whilst on service of the country in Tokyo at the G7. He was in Japan at the G7. He has returned from the G7. He is gathering the information. What you know of the Prime Minister is that he will deal with these issues properly and professionally. But the first point of that is to gather the information required on which he can take a view. And that is what he is doing.
Sir Jeremy Wright.
My right honourable friend will recall that the Committee on Standards in Public Life, when I was a member of it, recommended that the independent advisor should be able to initiate their own inquiries into breaches of the ministerial code, should be able to determine whether there was a breach, leaving, of course, properly sanctions for the Prime Minister to determine. That has several advantages. It gives the benefit of a decision being taken at arm's length from government, and if I may say to my right honourable friend, it would also mean we will have fewer occasions such as this, and he'll have to answer fewer UQs like this.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What the Honourable Gentleman says, of course, is true. It is always a pleasure to be before this House in any circumstances. And to respond to my right honourable friend, I wouldn't wish us to detract from the fact that the ministerial code is a Prime Minister's document. It is a code as to how the Prime Minister expects his ministers or her ministers to behave in a set of circumstances. The Prime Minister is the ultimate judge of that ministerial code. I believe the first independent advisor was appointed in 2006 to have a role to support the Prime Minister in that function. And I think we must recall and remind ourselves that it is actually the ministerial code is the Prime Minister's document, and he needs to be able to take decisions on the back of it regarding his ministerial team.
SNP spokesperson Kirsty Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a descent into absolute farce. Instead of professionalism, accountability and integrity that the Prime Minister promised when he came into office, we are faced with calamity, chaos and corruption. The MP for Uxbridge continues to be investigated. The MP for Stratford-upon-Avon had to leave Cabinet in disgrace, and we are seeing revelation after revelation about the misdeeds and wrongdoings of the Home Secretary. First, the request to organise a personal speed awareness course, and today, the revelation that the Home Secretary did not disclose her extensive work with the Africa Justice Foundation, 19 alumni of which are now in senior positions in the Rwandan government. Mr. Speaker, how can the Prime Minister continue to pretend that he's presiding over a government with anything other than their own personal interests at heart? Isn't it the case that the people of Scotland, and indeed all the people of these Isles, would be better served by politicians who actually understand and stick to the principles of public life and the ministerial code? Will the Prime Minister ensure an investigation is undertaken into all of the alleged ministerial code breaches? Mr. Speaker, what is the point in having a ministerial code if ministers simply ignore it?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, there is information being gathered, and that will be the first point to determine the next steps beyond this. It's always interesting, though, to hear from the SNP about farcical situations with ethics, and the one advantage of a camper van is, I suppose, it doesn't go very fast.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have no first-hand knowledge of this particular case, but does my right honourable friend the Minister agree with me that there is and should always be a difference between asking a civil servant to do something which may or may not be wrong, and asking a civil servant for advice on whether something is or is not likely to be wrong if you do it?
Yes. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course, I would agree that there is a difference there, but I wouldn't wish to speculate about this particular circumstance, as my right honourable friend will understand.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister is gathering the evidence, he is asking for more information. What is so wrong with just launching an investigation properly through the correct channels?
Minister.
There's nothing incorrect with the process, which has been conducted properly and professionally. The Prime Minister will gather the information and then decide next steps. It's very simple.
Sir Charles Walker.
Mr. Speaker, I have an admission to make. The Home Secretary is not on my Christmas card list, and I'm certainly not on hers. And I hope this is a question, not a statement, but I find it hard to get my head around the fact that the BBC sent its political editor halfway across the world to a G7 conference summit where we were discussing energy security, Ukraine, defence, to ask our Prime Minister a question about a speed awareness course. This is the question, why? Why?
No, do it.
As my right honourable friend is well aware, the BBC is editorially completely independent. But I absolutely hear what he says.
Ellie Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Right Honourable Member for Fareham was the Attorney General, she tweeted her support for Dominic Cummings driving to Bernard Castle to test his eyesight. When she was Home Secretary under Liz Truss, she was sacked for sending sensitive government information from a personal email address. And as Home Secretary under Rishi Sunak, she faces allegations of instructing civil servants to arrange a private speed awareness course. Every step of the way, it's one rule for members of this government and another for everyone else. What will it finally take to get an investigation?
An investigation will be dependent on the information gathered. The Prime Minister will gather that information. He'll take a decision on the back of the information that he has received.
In recent weeks, the Home Secretary has publicly supported the majority view that immigration levels are too high in this country, and she's led the debate on how we can reduce overall migration numbers. Given that 6,000 people are convicted of speeding every day, and like the majority of people, the Home Secretary has paid the fine and taken the points, does my honourable friend agree with me that this leak is a clear attempt to play the woman not the ball, an attempt that undermines our democracy and distracts from the important job of delivering on ordinary people's priorities?
Minister. The Home Secretary has an incredibly important job to do. I totally agree with my honourable friend, and I know she's deeply committed, whatever the noise, to get on and deliver that job for the British people. Obviously, information will be gathered, but I know that the Home Secretary is deeply committed to that task and will continue to do it.
Of the ethics advisor is at the sole discretion of the Prime Minister. The inquiries that are carried out are at the sole discretion of the Prime Minister. Actions taken on the outcome of any report are at the sole discretion of the Prime Minister. Do you think maybe there's a problem with this process?
Certainly the honourable gentleman is aware that an independent adviser can recommend to the Prime Minister that a particular course of action is taken, although ultimately the honourable gentleman is right that the ministerial code is a matter for the Prime Minister. It is his code and he has to determine the standards expected of ministers in his or her government.
Cherie Blair, what's wrong with this country? We used to have proper scandals about sex or money. Or about Prime Ministers invading Iraq on dodgy evidence in which hundreds of thousands of people die. Apparently this is a scandal, always moral outrage is ludicrous, that a minister asks her private office about something and she takes their advice. What's happened to the Osmothely rules? We all know what's this all about. They're attacking a good Home Secretary who's trying to attack the real scandal of mass immigration to this country. Give us support.
Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend for the question. There is and I understand what he's saying, but there are. Is this all a storm in the teacup? Is the question being asked by my right honourable friend? That the information will be gathered by the Prime Minister. As I said earlier to my honourable friend, whatever that process, I know that the Home Secretary is deeply committed to continue to deliver on her incredibly important work of delivering for the British people.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister promised integrity, professionalism and accountability. I think the first two, we'll all agree, have been shot long ago, even before this latest incident. In terms of accountability, he has now taken personal responsibility for this. But I think the real accountability, I'm sure the honourable member on the front bench would agree, is now down to the British people at the next general election, which can't come sooner. It needs to come sooner rather than later.
Indeed. The British people will know that the Prime Minister will act in a professional and proper manner. He always does, and he's doing so in these circumstances. I believe it's not totally unknown for the Labour Party to have issues that they need to look at of a disciplinary nature, and I dare say they have processes. We too have processes, and we'll make certain, the Prime Minister will make certain, having gathered the information, that he does what he feels is right next.
Andy Crew.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend for Broxbourne makes the right point about the BBC's political editor, but here we have 50 members or so of the opposition choosing to spend their time debating this question. Does my right honourable friend think that we've been called out in defence? And, Mr. Speaker, we are called out in defence of the government. Does the Minister think that their constituents will be proud of the way their representatives are using their time?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I have a long memory, and I do recall a little while ago an urgent question being asked by a member of the House, and the right honourable lady coming here to defend the Labour Party's actions, amongst other things, on the matter of Sue Gray and an appointment. And I remember the right honourable lady saying what a complete waste of time it was for this Parliament, that we were spending our time, wasting our time on these issues. I think my honourable friend raises a very pertinent point.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the time that the Prime Minister is taking to decide what to do about the Home Secretary's actions, any of us could have taken a speed awareness test 17 times and counting. So does the Minister agree with me that this to the public looks like weak leadership and leaves the Prime Minister's commitment to integrity accountability and professionalism just an empty promise?
The Prime Minister does things properly and professionally. It's right that he gets the information and he bases decisions on the information. He does that as Prime Minister on the whole remit of government policy. It's quite right that he should do it on this circumstance as well.
Mr. Speaker, does my honourable friend agree with me that once this nonsense has been dealt with, that we should be asking why, when and how this was leaked, because there is also a civil service code to be adhered to?
Look, I thank my honourable friend. Right now, the focus is on gathering the information the Prime Minister needs to take a decision on this. But I do thank him for his intervention. Clearly, it's always a matter of concern when information gets out which in unauthorised ways and unauthorised circumstances. But I would say the focus now is on just gathering this information.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is not about just a speeding fine. This is about the integrity of the Home Secretary and how she behaved to officials when she received that fine. So did the Cabinet Office inform the Prime Minister about the emails sent to the Propriety and Ethics team regarding the request for a private speeding course?
The Prime Minister now is asking for the information that is pertinent to this, and he'll take decisions on the basis of the information that he receives.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork are more interested in how the Home Secretary is going to empty the hotels that are being used right now, undermining £56 million of levelling up funding with economic migrants and asylum seekers, interested in how to use the 330 brand new police officers that have been recruited to tackle crime and fly tipping in places like Cobridge, Tunstall and Smallthorne, are interested in making sure that we use that £2 million of Safer Streets funding that we secured to put new alley gates and additional CCTV. That is what they want to see, not this witch hunt from the party opposite, where the Home Secretary has already taken accountability by having...
Mr Gullis, when I stand up, you sit down. Once we get that message, we'll understand each other. We do want to get through. I think the Minister absolutely got the question, even if he's not responsible for most of our direction.
I did, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend raises an absolutely valuable point, but for his constituents, what they are worried about is the conduct of our policy in relation to a whole range of issues, including their personal security and migration, and a whole list which the Home Office has an incredibly important job to do, and I know my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, is absolutely determined to produce those answers for the British people.
Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They say confession is good for the soul. Recently, I took a speed awareness course. It was very well taught, available at an early hour so that it didn't interfere with my work, and available to all equally. Why didn't the Home Secretary avail herself of this equal opportunity?
I thank the honourable gentleman. I'm better informed about speed awareness courses, but I'm afraid I'm not going to comment on the specifics of this circumstance. The Prime Minister is gathering the information, and then he will take a decision on the back of that.
Andrew Gwynne.
Thank you. Can the Minister confirm that civil servants contacted the Cabinet Office's Propriety and Ethics team about the Home Secretary's request? And if so, why does he think that the Prime Minister doesn't have that same integrity to ask his ethics advisor to formally investigate what happened?
Minister.
The Prime Minister is gathering information to ascertain the facts, then he takes a decision on the next steps from there.
Cherie.
Mr. Speaker, within the last hour it's been reported by the Independent newspaper that the Home Secretary stands accused of fresh ministerial code breaches over undisclosed links to the Rwandan government. As Chair of the Joint Committee on Human Rights, I've been in correspondence with the Home Secretary about well-evidenced human rights concerns in Rwanda and our committee's concern about the plans to send asylum seekers there. The Home Secretary, I think it's fair to say, seems to take a rather rosy-eyed view of Rwanda's human rights record. Does the Minister think this has got anything to do with her undisclosed links to the Rwandan government? And will he include that potential breach of the ministerial code in any inquiry?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable and learned lady knows more than me on this subject, because she's read the full article. I just saw the tweet. So I can't really comment on that. I understand it was something that the Home Secretary did with Cherie Blair and others some considerable time ago before, a charitable endeavour before she entered Parliament. That's just what I got from the tweet. I can't really comment any more on that, as the Honourable Lady will understand.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I received a letter from the Honourable Member for Bishop Auckland, to whom I've given reference to her that I'd raised this today as Under Secretary of State for Levelling Up, in response to the concerns I've raised in respect to the activities at Teesworks. She advised me that there was nothing untoward at play, although I was not provided any details made by her. But importantly, as she was the recipient...
Order. Can I just say, I think it might be more a point of order rather than actually in the middle of where we are now. I'm not quite sure. To the ministerial code on this particular minister? Right, I think we... Yeah, I know it doesn't say that.
Exactly, Mr. Speaker, because importantly, the Minister was the recipient of a properly declared four-figure donation from a party directly connected to these dealings. Surely she should have recused herself, and in failing to do so is in direct contravention of the Ministerial Code at paragraph 7.1 and onwards. Doesn't the Minister agree?
Mr. Speaker, you'll appreciate, sir, that I'm not in any position to comment on the kind of allegations that the honourable gentleman is making. I'm not in a position to make any comment on that whatsoever. That's for another occasion.
Sure.
Can he update the House on the status of the Special Advisers Code, given that the Home Secretary's Special Adviser apparently lied repeatedly to journalists, again in clear breach of the Special Advisers Code, and yet the Prime Minister and the Cabinet Secretary have done absolutely nothing?
That's right. Minister, can I just say, if both gentlemen want a conversation, please take it outside, not across the chamber. Minister. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in response to the honourable gentleman's question, I think the honourable gentleman will be well aware of the contents of the Special Advisers Code, which does set out how special advisers should act in these circumstances. I am not in a position to talk about the specifics of this case in these circumstances. This is early days. The Prime Minister is gathering information regarding the overall picture, and will take decisions in due course.
Stephen Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister believe that the Home Secretary has acted entirely within the ministerial code while in office?
Minister.
I think it's for the Home Secretary, as we say, that there are two people. That there are. I said right at the start of my statement, Mr. Speaker, that there are. The ministerial code is a matter for the Prime Minister. He is the ultimate arbiter on all questions regarding the ministerial code, and it's for individual ministers to make certain that they adhere to it. That is the facts of the case.
Mike Kingsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why is the Prime Minister so weak and indecisive? He can't even refer his Home Secretary to his independent ethics advisor. Yeah. Weak.
Minister.
I don't know if the honourable gentleman had a chance to be here for the statement yesterday on the G7. What he would not find from that Prime Minister's statement was any suggestion of weakness. You saw a Prime Minister who's just come back from the G7, where he was focused on delivering for the British people, and he went through yesterday the litany of achievements that we have made at that summit. That is a country that is standing up for itself on the world stage, and that is a Prime Minister able to deliver for the people of this country, and that is the main event.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the Cabinet Office Minister is just a wee bit teed off with the Home Secretary, because he came here to defend her today, and lo and behold, here's another scandal, actually mentioned earlier by my right honourable learned friend. How many inquiries does the Minister think the PM's ethics advisor should be asked to conduct, or should the Home Secretary just resign and save us all the bother?
Minister.
Whether this is a matter for the independent adviser will be a matter for the Prime Minister to determine. He is going to gather that information. He will then take a decision on it.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State has apologised for the speeding, has fully unwillingly complied with the police and paying the fine, lessons learned and punishment given. In the midst of the storm created today, lessons hopefully can be learned. Does the Minister agree that we can all learn from the biblical quotation, "He or she who is without sin can throw the first stone"?
Minister.
I think, Mr. Speaker, if that is my last question, that is a very good point on which to end this session, and I thank my honourable friend for the question that he made.
Point of order, Ed David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At Prime Minister's questions on the 19th of April, the Prime Minister claimed that last year the number of NHS dentists had increased in England by 500. However, today the British Dental Association has revealed that the number of dentists delivering NHS work has actually fallen by almost 700 in the 22-23 financial year. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister did not intentionally aim to mislead the House, but have you had any indication from him or his office that he intends to come back to the House to correct the record and give members the latest information?
I think somebody else wanted to ask a very similar question. Mary Kelly Ford. Is it this?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, the Prime Minister may have made several inaccurate statements regarding the number of NHS dentists. Since January, the Prime Minister has said on 7 occasions that there are more dentists working in the NHS. On the 3rd of May, in response to my question at Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister stated there are, and I quote, 500 more dentists working in the NHS this year than last year. However, a Freedom of Information request obtained by the British Dental Association has thrown the Prime Minister's comments into doubt. According to the FOI, the number of dentists is down by 695 compared to the previous year. There are, in fact, over 1,100 fewer dentists undertaking NHS work than before the pandemic, which brings the workforce to levels not seen since 2012-2013. So may I ask for your advice on how we might encourage the Prime Minister to correct the record as soon as possible?
Can I first of all thank the honourable member and both honourable members for your notice of the point of order. Although the content of the answers to the parliamentary questions and contributions is not a matter for the Chair, if an error has been made in this instance, I am sure the Government will seek to correct it as quickly as possible. And what I would say, if the honourable member or honourable members and right honourable member wishes to pursue the issue, I am sure the Table Office will give advice on which to pursue the problem. Point of order, Daisy Cooper.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, today it has been revealed that there have been 35,000 cases of sexual misconduct or violence in the NHS in the past 5 years. Medical colleges and unions are calling for an inquiry over these shocking levels of sexual assault in the NHS. The BBC, The Guardian, the British Medical Journal and Byline and others are now reporting on this issue, but we've heard very little from the Government. Could you, Mr. Speaker, please advise me whether the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care has given any indication that the Government intends to make a statement on this issue this week? And could you please further advise members like me who have been trying to force action on this issue for the best part of a year, how we can secure a debate on the floor of this House?
Can I first of all thank the Honourable Lady for her point of order. I've had no notification that the Secretary of State plans to make a statement on this matter. I suggest the Honourable Lady visits the Table Office to seek advice on how she might pursue this issue. The Treasury bench will, I'm sure, have taken note of the comments, and I'm sure that she knows there are many means that she may wish to take this forward. Right. No more points of order. I'm now going to come to the 10-minute rule bill. Anna Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to amend the Animal Welfare Act 2006 to require a person in charge of a dog to take all reasonable steps to ensure that that dog does not fatally injure another dog and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, Britain is undoubtedly a nation of dog lovers, with recent estimates now suggesting there are some 13 million dogs in the UK. In other words, almost half of all households probably has a dog. And for many, a dog is not just a pet, but a much-loved member of the family. Certainly my predecessor, Sir David, loved his 2 pugs, Lily and Beau, and my own Cavapuchon Lottie is a much-loved member of our family. Research also shows, Mr. Speaker, that companionship is the most common reason for having a dog, and that was absolutely the case for my constituent, Michael. Michael, who is with us today in the public gallery, lost his long-standing girlfriend unexpectedly and suddenly to epilepsy. So after her death, he adopted her beautiful, white, fluffy Bichon Frise bitch, Emily, known affectionately as Millie, both to keep him company, but also to help him grieve. Emily was a wonderful dog. Gentle, sweet, obedient, she totally captured Michael's heart. However, 18 months ago, Emily was savagely attacked by an off-lead, out-of-control dog while on a walk through the Rose Garden in Chalkwell Park, Leigh-on-Sea. Michael described the attack as like watching a horror movie. The dog came at Emily like a missile, and although she was on her lead, shook her like a rag doll. Michael found himself helpless to stop Emily being torn apart in front of his eyes, and after the attack had no option but to carry Emily, bleeding and with serious open wounds to her abdomen, to the nearest vet, where sadly she was put down. Outrageously, the owner of the dog that attacked Emily refused to take any responsibility, not even paying the vet's bill for euthanasia. Mr. Deputy Speaker, no dog owner or dog should have to go through what Michael and Emily experienced, and I believe we would all be devastated if that happened to our own pet dog. But I believe we would be doubly devastated if, on reporting the matter to the police, we were told there is nothing they could do as it was simply dog on dog. Yet that is exactly what happened, Mr. Speaker, to Michael, which is why I am introducing this bill today. For sadly, Mr. Speaker, Michael's experience is far from unique. Since launching this bill, I've been inundated with heartbreaking tales from dog owners all around the country. Blue, the collie, Beau, the Yorkshire Terrier, Laos, the Dachshund, Ozzy, the Cocker Spaniel, are just some of the names of beautiful dogs that have been viciously killed by other dogs through no fault of their own or their owners. Mr. Speaker, the statistics back up the anecdotal evidence. After this incident, I submitted freedom of information requests to all 43 police forces in the UK, asking 1, if they recall dog-on-dog attacks as separate offence, and 2, if so, how many they had recorded over the last 5 years. Shockingly, only 14 police forces currently record a dog-on-dog attack as a separate incident. However, of that 14, in 2016, there were 1,700 dog-on-dog attacks reported and recorded. Since lockdown, with everyone buying their COVID-19 pandemic puppies, the numbers have skyrocketed. In 2021, the same 14 police forces recorded 11,559 dog-on-dog attacks, a 700% increase, with a shocking 2,264 in London alone. Mr. Speaker, clearly the true incidence of dog-on-dog attacks across the country is likely to be far greater, since it would be ridiculous to assume that dog attacks only occur in areas where police forces happen to record them. So scaled up, therefore, there could be as many as 35,000 dog-on-dog attacks each year across the UK, and increasing. Indeed, pet insurance companies have also reported dog-on-dog attacks to be rising, and resulting in vets' bills running to many thousands of pounds for affected households. Now, laws, both civil and criminal, have been strengthened in recent years to protect the public where a dog presents as a risk to public safety, whether in public or private. But it remains the case that a dog owner is not liable to any form of criminal prosecution when their dog fatally attacks or seriously injures another dog, unless the other dog is a guide, assistance or service dog, or unless the dog bites a human or there are grounds for reasonable apprehension that a dog will injure any person. Mr. Speaker, that is quite simply not right, because self-evidently this is frequently not the case with a dog-on-dog attack, where so often a larger dog is making a beeline for a smaller dog. In Michael's case, for example, he didn't fear any injury to himself, because it was so clear the dog was going for Emily. Ironically, if Emily had been stolen, not attacked, Michael's legal remedies would have been far greater. For starters, under the 1968 Theft Act, the perpetrator could have received up to 7 years imprisonment. But because she was brutally torn apart by someone else's dog, nothing could be done. Not surprisingly, this leaves pet owners feeling powerless and deeply frustrated. It's also no doubt the reason why police forces don't even record such awful incidences. Plainly, it is not the dogs which are the problem. Dogs have owners, and every dog owner has a responsibility to ensure their dog does not fatally attack another one. In addition, there is a growing cohort of evidence that tackling dog-on-dog aggression, and dog attacks in particular, may well prevent a dog from going on and attacking other animals, adults, or even children. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as Benjamin Franklin so famously said. It is all these issues, Mr. Speaker, that this bill seeks to address. Number one, amending the Animal Welfare Act to criminalise fatal dog-on-dog attacks would extend the same protection to pet dogs that already exists for service, guide and assistance dogs. Pet dogs are as important to humans as service dogs. Indeed, when it comes to mental health, all dogs are service dogs. Number two, Emily's law will empower owners to pursue justice if their beloved pet is brutally attacked, whilst not demonising any particular breed or creating unhelpful stereotypes around certain breeds of dogs. Three, this bill is about encouraging responsible dog ownership and animal welfare, placing the responsibility for a fatal dog attack fairly and squarely on the person in charge of the dog, and empowering the police to take action will have a deterrent effect, thus encouraging more responsible dog ownership. And finally, the bill will also compel local police forces to record dog-on-dog attacks as separate offences, so that finally the full scale of these awful offences can be seen and counted. Of course, passing this law will be a significant step in the right direction, but its effectiveness will depend heavily upon enforcement. So clearly, we must continue to work closely with the police and law enforcement agencies to ensure offenders are brought to justice. I'm well aware that most private members' bills never make the statute book, but I am hopeful that this one will. Certainly, it would be extremely popular if it did, and Emily's law has already garnered a huge amount of public support. However, if the bill doesn't make the statute book, I would urge the government to initiate an immediate review of existing laws regarding dog attacks with a view to amending the law, the current law, to protect pet dogs in a similar way to service, guide and assistance dogs. Mr. Speaker, this bill is about protecting the 13 million dogs across the country. Most dog owners are responsible, but there must be consequences for the small minority who are not. This is about dealing with that small minority who irresponsibly allow their dogs to kill other people's dogs. By passing this bill, not only will we help to make all dogs more secure, we will also make our parks, our streets, our towns and our cities, especially the new city of Southend, safer places for us all to live, work and visit.
That the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Wayne David, Elliot Colburn, Henry Smith, Mark Francois, Oliver Heald, Jane Stevenson, Selene Saxby, Gareth Johnson, Margaret Ferrier, Damien Green, Peter Gibson and myself, Mr. Speaker.
Anna Firth.
Animal Welfare Responsibility for Dog Attacks Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 24th of November.
Friday the 24th of November. Well done. Okay, well done. We now come to the Opposition Day motion in the name of the Leader of the Opposition on leasehold reform. I now call the Shadow Secretary of State, Lisa Nande, to move.
Mr Speaker, I beg to move the motion on the order paper in my name of those of my honourable friends that notes the commitment by the Secretary of State to abolish the feudal leasehold system in January 2023 and calls on him to keep his promise. Mr Speaker, it's always nice to see the honourable gentleman in his place, but there was a time in this House when the Secretary of State couldn't resist a housing debate. His appearances in this chamber are fast becoming rarer than the sight of a Tory councillor in the north of England. I worry that he may be in danger of becoming extinct. And Mr Speaker, nothing, as he knows and we know, matters more than a home. Security in your own home, the right to make it your own, and the right to live somewhere fit for human habitation are non-negotiable. Housing may be a market, but it is not just a market. It is a fundamental human right. But for so many people in our country, what they thought would be the reward from years of hard work and the realisation of their dreams of home ownership are shattered by the reality of what it means to be a leaseholder. I will.
Thank you very much for giving way. In the North West, as she will know, and in North Wales, leasehold houses were sold for many years. And we are now seeing a situation where people were told at the time they'd be able to buy the freehold for perhaps a few £1,000s, are now being asked for £20,000, £30,000, which they cannot afford, and they are finding that selling their house is becoming very difficult. Linked with that are often very high management fees as well, and this is really affecting them and their lives, because people are telling me they don't feel they actually own their house anymore.
The honourable gentleman is absolutely right, and he's been a tireless campaigner for his constituents who are affected by this, but I fear we're going to hear so much more of this from all sides of the House today. We've heard it for years, that people's homes have become a prison, and the shocking lack of information, or in the case that he cites, misinformation, just compounds the injustice that is felt by many. And for so many of those leaseholders, what they face is the daily reality of appalling charges and uncertainty, an issue that affects millions of people up and down this country, nearly 5 million leasehold homes in England, the majority of flats in the private sector, and 8% of all houses in England. Certainly will.
Thank the Shadow Secretary of State for giving way. And would she agree with my constituent who has been charged £80,000 on top of really expensive mortgage payments which have gone up since the disastrous budget of last autumn? And she's in tears, her mental health has collapsed, and she's saying, MP, what should I do?
And the reality is that for so many of us, and I include myself in this as a constituency MP, there are very few options currently available to people who find themselves in this situation. My own constituency in Wigan had the 17th highest number of transactions for leaseholds on houses in the country last year. We're not just failing to solve the problem for people who are trapped in this situation, we're compounding it and making it worse because more people are being sucked into this exploitative system.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And as well as the concerns around leasehold, there are many people who own their homes who have problems with management companies. Management companies who claim they are charging this money to upkeep communal areas but increase the charges time after time after time. There's no one regulating these companies. They're accountable to no one. And even as members of Parliament, it's very difficult to hold them to account for their bad practice. And does she agree with me that this could be the next big housing scandal, the use of these appalling companies?
I agree with her, and I think it is already a scandal. It's just a scandal that is happening in plain sight, and it's one of the reasons why I hope what we'll hear from the Minister when he responds in a moment is that the government will commit to implementing the Lord Best Working Group recommendations as quickly as possible, because this is a huge problem, but it is almost uniquely ours alone. Virtually every country in the world, apart from England and Wales, has either reformed or ended this archaic feudal model. We stand as an outlier. Now, the good news, Mr Deputy Speaker, is we know what the answers are. It's been clear since we received the Law Commission proposals in 2020 that we need new legislation to end the sale of new private leasehold houses, effective immediately after royal assent is given, and we need new legislation to replace private leasehold flats with common hold. There have been lots of promises to this effect, but little in the way of action, and I expect we're going to hear from the honourable member exactly what that has meant for her constituents.
I recently became aware of a situation in my Liverpool Riverside constituency. The freeholder was trying to do a lucrative deal to use the block to accommodate people seeking asylum. They tried to evict leaseholders under the pretence of a fire safety eviction plan. The residents rightly say that their sense of security has been fundamentally shaken. So can my honourable friend tell me what she thinks this government should do to ensure my Liverpool Riverside constituents and millions of others are not denied the security of their tenures?
I absolutely agree with her, and if we could just do what we've been promising to do for a very long time, the reality for her constituents would be transformed from one of insecurity and anxiety to one of security and the foundation of a decent life. And I can only say that they're very lucky to have her as their Member of Parliament to fight on their behalf. You know, it was 2002, Mr Deputy Speaker, when the Labour government introduced common hold, and there were voices even then, some of them in this room today, who urged us to go further and end this injustice altogether. And in the decades since, there has been a growing recognition on all sides of this House that action is long overdue. In 2017, the government said it would legislate to prohibit the creation of new residential long leases on houses, whether newly built or in existing freehold houses, other than in exceptional circumstances. Now, this was a commitment that was repeated in the 2019 manifesto and by the former Secretary of State, the member for Newark, and yet leaseholders were left waiting. I certainly will.
We've had a further commitment from the government along similar lines. In response to a select committee report in 2019, the government said the government agrees with the committee that other and in exceptional circumstances, there is no good reason for houses to be sold on a leasehold basis. 4 years on, thousands more properties have been sold on an unacceptable basis, and effectively tenants of those properties left to pay exceptional costs and not being able to get out of the lease without very high charges indeed.
Well, can I just pay tribute to the honourable gentleman and the work that his committee has done on this over a very long period of time. As he said, there is no reason for this to continue except for a lack of political will to do what we've all acknowledged is the right thing in this place. Now, into this absurd scenario steps the current Secretary of State, and I know that the right honourable gentleman has the right intentions. Indeed, his record has been very clear. On the 9th of June last year, the Secretary of State told this place it is absolutely right that we end the absurd feudal system of leasehold, which restricts people's rights in a way that is indefensible in the 21st century. And then on the 30th of January, this year, he said in response to a question I posed to him, finally, the Honourable Lady asked if we will maintain our commitment to abolish the feudal system of leasehold. We absolutely will. We will bring forward legislation shortly. But now we are told the Secretary of State was being too maximalist. We've had grumbling from the backbenches opposite that the Secretary of State is being too socialist. And so Downing Street have stepped in and plans are being rowed back, and he isn't even able to set foot in this chamber today. It's a bit of a mess, isn't it? In just a few months, the whole housing policy of this government has completely unravelled. As my honourable friend said a moment ago, they crashed the economy and they sent mortgages through the roof. They caved into their own backbenchers and at one stroke ensured their own housing targets weren't worth the paper they were written on, leading to dozens of councils reducing or halting altogether their house building plans and a collapse in the projected number of houses built in coming years in the middle of a housing crisis. The Home Builders Federation warned earlier this year that new housing supply in England would soon fall to its lowest level since the Second World War. And while they're locked in internal battles on making the basic improvements for renters, their Levelling Up Bill, their flagship bit of legislation that was supposed to reform an archaic planning system, is stuck in the House of Lords and is now commonly referred to in the other place as the Christmas tree bill. It has so many amendments attached to it. It does make you wonder what the point of them actually is. The Secretary of State was clear that he would abolish leasehold. Now, no one ever thought this would be done overnight. The Law Commission reports set out a clear roadmap on enfranchisement, common hold and the right to manage. The major leasehold groups have always recognised that it would take some time to phase out this archaic system, and so have we. But there is no excuse for inaction when it comes to the manifesto commitment to end the sale of new private leasehold houses, or for delaying when it comes to starting that process of phasing out existing leasehold and making common hold, as my honourable friend has often said, the default for the future. I certainly will.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and she's setting out a compelling case as to why leasehold needs to be consigned to the dustbin of history. It's not just the feudal system that needs to go, it's the sharp practices that go along with it. I've got constituents who live in their own home, they don't own the land that it's built on, they rent the land that it's built on, but they aren't able to make even the most basic alterations to their house without getting the permission of the landowner, who then charges extortionate fees. That's just wrong, isn't it?
Absolutely right. People should have, who've bought their own homes, should have the right to change their doorbells and make basic alterations without seeking the permission of someone they've never met, will never meet, and in many cases don't even know who that is. And pay tribute to him for the work that he's done campaigning on this issue and for standing up for his constituents. And make no mistake, I would just ask the ministers to take this back to the Secretary of State when they next see him. He will know that this is a significant setback for leaseholders. They've been left waiting for far too long. And for all of those who've campaigned so hard and for so long and thought that they could finally see light at the end of what has been a very long, very dark tunnel, I'd like to place on record our thanks to Katie Kenrick at the National Leasehold Campaign, and also to Common Hold Now for all they continue to do, alongside members in this place who've been tireless advocates, including the members for Weaver Vale and Ellesmere Port, and the member for Worthing West, the father of the house. Now, I'm sure that the Minister will, I hope he will, be keen to talk about legislation that we're told will be forthcoming in the autumn. We on this side strongly believe it is a no-brainer to crack down on unfair fees and contract terms, to require transparency on service charges, and to give leaseholders the right to challenge rip-off fees and conditions or poor performance, along the lines we've just heard about from many of the members present. I will.
Thank you for giving me away. She's been very generous with her time. I have met many people who, particularly first-time buyers, who purchased a leasehold property, but they were not the lawyer that they used for the transaction. They were offered a discount by the developer selling the house. And surprise, surprise, the fact that it was a leasehold and some of the pitfalls that that contained were never pointed out to them. And this seems to be a common practice.
I think that story illustrates so well that this form of tenure, this feudal archaic system, has become a home for sharp practice all over the place, We've heard it from honourable members over and over again in this House, on both sides of the House, and it's about time we did it. Now, there are important steps forward that we can take on ground rent, on extending leases, that will make life easier for many. But after all that's been promised, leaseholders have the right to expect their government to go further. So will the Minister give us a cast-iron guarantee that the bill they've promised will bring to an end to the sale of new private leasehold houses at the point the bill comes into force, ensure those provisions are applied retrospectively to December 2017, a promise that has been made repeatedly by this government, and bring in a workable system to replace private leasehold flats with common hold. Back in May 2021, the government launched the Common Hold Council, an advisory panel of leasehold groups and industry experts to inform them on the future of this type of home ownership. Can the Minister update the House on when the Council last met and what their recommendations are for bringing in a common hold system? Because he will know that common hold has been enforced since 2004, but it's failed to take off for two main reasons. Firstly, that conversion from leasehold to common hold requires unanimity from everyone with an interest in the block, which has proved difficult to achieve. And secondly, developers have not been persuaded to build new common hold developers. Members on both sides of this House are acutely aware of how complex an issue this is to get right, but complexity is not an excuse for inaction. And credit must be given to the 3 Law Commission reports, which represent a detailed, thoughtful roadmap which Labour have committed to implementing in full. It's only by implementing these proposals in full that the common hold system will sufficiently improve, so that leaseholders can easily convert to common hold, gain greater control over their property and a greater say in how the costs of running their common hold are met. Those proposals would go further still to support those on low incomes and those who found themselves trapped in leasehold by improving mortgage lenders' confidence in common hold to increase the choice of financing available for home buyers. They would allow shared ownership leases to be included within common hold and enable common hold to be used for larger mixed-use developments which accommodate not only residential properties but shops, restaurants and leisure facilities. Mr Deputy Speaker, we have debated these issues in this chamber so many times since the appalling tragedy at Grenfell, when a group of people were rendered invisible to decision makers only a few miles away with the most appalling and tragic consequences. Clearly, the burdens that homeowners have long laboured under because of the dysfunction of the property agent market and the inherent flaws of the leasehold system have become more acute over recent years as a result of the building safety crisis and surging inflation. The combination of this has already pushed many hard-pressed leaseholders to the brink of financial ruin. How can we accept that these rip-off companies, on behalf of owners we don't even often know and do not have the right to find out who they are allowed to tell people, as my honourable friend said, whether they can even change the doorbell on their own home or make minor changes that would make all the difference to their own lives? Who of us can doubt that a person's home is the biggest investment, in most cases, that they will ever make? So it is simply unacceptable for so many homes to be built on an exploitative and unjust business model. Levelling Up, the title of this department, was supposed to answer a clamour for more control and agency, to give people who have a stake in the outcome and skin in the game a greater ability to make decisions about their own lives. And as I've said in this place before, this is the legacy that we should seek to build, and we should do it in tribute to the tireless campaigners and in honour of those who lost their lives in Grenfell, that we build a fairer, more just system that is fit for the 21st century. Everybody, everywhere in the United Kingdom, regardless of the type of tenure that they happen to hold, has the right to a decent, secure, safe home, full stop. We could end these arcane rules. We could give power back to people over their own homes, their lives and their communities. Politics is about choices. And Labour is clear. We choose to bring this injustice to an end. So change is coming. And the government now has to decide. Will they enable that change or will they seek to block it? Whose side are they on?
Yeah. The question is, as on the order paper. Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. A fairer housing market that works for everyone is at the heart of this government's central mission to level up opportunity, prosperity and pride throughout the United Kingdom. The Honourable Lady for Wigan at the end of her speech said politics was about choices. And she is absolutely right, and that is why this government is committed to ensuring safe, decent and secure homes are available to everybody, regardless of tenure, whether through a better deal for tenants in both the social and private rented sector, or through our unashamed support for home ownership and the security and the freedom it affords for people to make their homes truly their own and shape their futures. This government believes in the moral end of people owning their own homes and in allowing them to build up capital for themselves, their families and their future. And this should mean that that security and freedom allows people to make decisions about their own home, including over changes, repairs and improvements that are made or costs that are paid. And in reality, if Honourable Lady will bear with me one moment, in reality, the time-limited nature of residential leasehold and the sharing of control with the landlord means a significant imbalance in power, and someone who may not live in the same building or share the same priorities, as the Honourable Lady has outlined, or the same motivations, making decisions affecting your home and your everyday life. I give way to the Honourable Lady from Hornsey and Wood Green.
I thank the Minister for giving way. And what does he say to the leaseholders living in a cost of living crisis with an increase in service charge through the roof, and yet, for example, 6 floors in a building but only 1 lift, which is now approaching its 8th week of being out of service, and everyone will have a similar story. There's no redress, there's no government taking responsibility or pushing the owners to do anything. Isn't this situation now just out of control?
Well, on the particular situation that has been outlined, I obviously don't know the detail. I would very much encourage the leaseholders to use all avenues which are available. There is redress. I accept that redress works in some instances and doesn't in others. But also, I would say to those residents, change is coming. Because we have said that too often leaseholders are being charged exploitative and multiplying ground rents in exchange for no or few or inadequate services, where high charges are being levied in order to respond to simple requests, where unaffordable costs to buy out the freehold or extend the leasehold are being applied, where upgrades to blocks such as electrical charging points are frustrated by rigid leases, or, as the Honourable Lady from Hornsey and Wood Green indicates, urgent repairs to buildings are being neglected. This does not, for anybody in this chamber or beyond, meet anyone's definition of home ownership. I will give way in a moment, but we'll make a little progress first. There is broad agreement across this House and beyond that this needs to change to make home ownership fairer, easier and cheaper, which is why the government has already taken significant steps to better protect leaseholders from unreasonable costs, and why we're committed to going further and bring forward further leasehold reforms to strengthen transparency and accountability. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman from Sheffield South East.
Thank you, Mr. for giving way. I'm pleased that the government's good intentions in a way, but the Select Committee Report 2019 had 52 recommendations. The government actually accepted many of them completely, and others it said it wanted to move towards accepting them, working out how it could be done. Since then, that's 2019, that's before the last general election, what has the government actually done? Would you just confirm that all they've done in practice is to bring in measures to ensure that peppercorn ground rents are charged on new leasehold houses? That's the only thing they've done out of all the recommendations they agreed to accept 4 years ago.
Grateful to my neighbour from Sheffield South East, and he preempts a part of my speech, which I'll come to in a moment. The Right Honourable Lady from Wigan, indicates that we have debated this point a number of times, many times in this chamber, and that is true. And there will be lots of opportunities to do that again, because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have committed to make it easier and cheaper for leaseholders to extend their lease or to buy their freehold. We will bring forward legislation to ban new residential long leases on houses, and are pleased to see that whilst there are still issues, the market has already responded, with only 1.4% of houses in England now being built as leasehold compared to nearly 15% previously. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady from Hull West.
I thank the Minister for giving way. You have heard my intervention earlier to my honourable friend. So I accept that he's talking about leasehold reform, but I want him to, if he could, just elaborate a bit on management companies. These are when people own their properties, but they're charged a management fee for communal areas. Now, these fees can be increased every year. There are no rules set around what extent these fees can reach at all. There's no oversight of them. There's no regulation of them. So as well as listing some of the things that the Minister's talking about with leasehold, are there any plans for government to look at regulation around these management companies that are, not all of them, but some of them, exploiting people?
Yeah. The Honourable Lady makes a very strong point, and I will come to that in a moment. I think we have shared concerns about both specifics, which we all will have experienced in our own as constituency MPs, Coppan Estates. I'm looking at you in North East Derbyshire, and then where on the general principle on a broader point, which I will come to in a moment when I have made a little further progress. And we have already taken action, and the Honourable Gentleman from Sheffield South East has highlighted that we have ended ground rents for most new residential leases. The Leasehold Reform Ground Rent Act 2022 came into force last June and prevents landlords under new residential long leases from requiring the leaseholder to pay a financial ground rent. This will ensure that people buying most new leases won't face problems associated with ground rents in the future. However, I'll make a little more progress before taking further interventions. We do remain concerned about the costs of ground rents, and in 2019 asked the Competition and Markets Authority to investigate abuses in the leasehold sector. Since then, the CMA has secured commitments benefiting over 20,000 leaseholders, including commitments to removing the doubling of ground rent terms and to revert charges to original rates. Yet, we know there is more to do to tackle unfair practices. We know that many leaseholders find the process for extending their lease or buying their freehold prohibitively expensive or complex or lacking transparency. Equally, we understand that many right-to-manage applications fail on technicalities, which may be attributed to an overly detailed procedure, and we're committed to improving this, making the process simpler, quicker, more flexible and more effective. And that's why, as has been outlined by the Honourable Lady in her opening speech, we asked the Law Commission to look at this issue, and we are carefully considering the reports they have produced since on enfranchisement, valuation and the right to manage. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman from...
Giving way. When many of these leasehold houses were actually sold, as I had mentioned at the beginning, they were the purchaser was promised they could purchase the freehold, only to find out that this has not only that wasn't an option, but they were sold on immediately, and they were packaged up, and they are actual financial products. And I've spoken to people who every couple of months get another letter informing them that it's been sold on to somebody else and sold on to somebody else. And this, as I've said, this is their life, this is their property, but they feel that they don't own it because it is being bought and sold on a regular basis.
The Honourable Gentleman makes a strong point about the importance of reform, and it's one of the reasons why we have committed to reform, and I hope we will be able to provide that in the coming months ahead in the remainder of the Parliament. I will make a little more progress, and I'll happily give way to my honourable friend from the New Forest. We are committed to tackling problems such as the ones that have been outlined by members at their root, and so we will abolish issues such as marriage value and cap ground rents in enfranchisement calculations, so leaseholders who currently pay onerous ground rents do not also have to pay an onerous premium. And to make the process simpler and more transparent, we will introduce an online calculator to help leaseholders understand what they will pay to extend their lease or to buy it out. These changes should and will generate substantial savings for some leaseholders, particularly those with fewer than 80 years left on their lease, and also ensure that landlords are sufficiently compensated in line with their interests. Changes that are therefore fair for all concerns. I give way to my honourable friend from the New Forest.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, the Minister, for whom I have a great deal of time and respect. But it does seem to me that what he's talking about is tinkering at the edges and improving a fundamentally unfair system. And I would gently remind him of an exchange I had with the Secretary of State on the 20th of February this year, when I asked if there was going to be fundamental reform, and he replied We hope in the forthcoming King's Speech to introduce legislation to fundamentally reform the system. Leaseholders, not just in this case, but in so many other cases, are held to ransom by freeholders. We need to end this feudal form of tenure and ensure individuals have the right to enjoy their own property fully. Do I detect a basic shift away from this position? I earnestly hope not.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He indicates and he highlights the importance of reform in this area and highlights the cross-party nature of the support for that. And I would not read anything into my comments other than we are committing to reform. We have said we will bring it forward, we will bring it forward, and it will happen in the remainder of this Parliament. And part of that reform will also be reforming unreasonable and excessive service charges. Many landlords and managing agents already do demonstrate good practice and provide significant and relevant information to leaseholders, but too many are failing to meet this standard, failing to provide sufficient information or sufficient clarity. We recognise that existing statutory requirements do not go far enough to enable leaseholders to identify and challenge unfair costs, and we will therefore act to improve this through better communication around these charges and a clearer route to challenge or seek redress if things go wrong, as has been outlined by some honourable members. I will come to my honourable friend, if he would just allow me to make progress in a moment. Ensuring that leaseholders better understand what they're paying for to more effectively challenge their landlord if the fees are unreasonable, and making it harder for landlords to hide unreasonable or unfair charges. I give way to my honourable friend from Totnes.
Way, and I hope he'll forgive me for this, because I wonder whether or not he might include within that legislation reform around park homes, because many of the points that he is making are also the same issues that are faced by park homes across the country. Unfair prices, utility prices at a very high level, all of which is totally unacceptable. This is the Wild West for them, and I'm sorry to ask in this debate, but...
My honourable friend makes an incredibly important point with regards to park homes. As somebody who has hundreds of park homes in my own constituency, I know how important it has been for residents over the last decade to see progress made on those issues. I was very pleased, as I know he will have been as well, to see the changes that were brought forward through my honourable friend from Christchurch bill to reform pitch fees from RPI to CPI. I know that has been welcomed across the park home sector, and I know the government will continue to look at what is possible going forward in terms of reform for the sector. Turning back to the specifics of the questions that were being put forward, when leaseholders do challenge their landlord, we are committed to ensuring that leaseholders are not subject to unjustified legal costs and can claim their own legal costs from their landlord. Currently, if permitted by the lease, leaseholders may be liable to pay the legal costs of their landlord, regardless of the outcome of the dispute, and even if they win their case. The circumstances in which a leaseholder can claim their own legal costs from their landlord is very limited. This can lead to leaseholders facing higher bills than the charges being challenged in the first place, and it can deter leaseholders from taking their concerns to a tribunal. We will act on this and ensure that leaseholders are genuinely free to seek justice and benefit when their case is proved. Mr Deputy Speaker, crucially, we also want to see more leaseholders benefiting from freehold ownership as set out in the Levelling Up White Paper, and we recognise that reinvigorating common hold has a significant part to play in this as a genuine alternative to leaseholds for flats. Some of the failings of the existing leasehold system have been all too evident when seeking to ensure those responsible for constructing dangerous buildings in the past should be the first to pay in putting them right. The Building Safety Act, in addition to the existing enforcement powers available through the Fire Safety Order of 2005 and the Housing Act of 2004, empowers leaseholders and regulators to compel building owners and landlords to fix and to pay to fix their unsafe buildings through remediation orders and remediation contribution orders. The effect of the Building Safety Act is intended that building owners and landlords who built defective buildings or who are associated with those responsible pay for the remedying of all historical safety defects, both cladding and non-cladding. And landlords who are not associated with developers but can afford to pay are also unable to pass on such costs to qualifying leaseholders. Similarly, on insurance costs, the FCA's latest report into broker insurance revealed that, on average, the premiums paid by leaseholders living in buildings with combustible cladding has tripled. This is unacceptable. Commissions on insurance policies also drive up prices. In 70% of cases, commissions are shared with property managing agents and freeholders by insurance brokers. This is an unfair burden which also must be relieved on leaseholders, which is why we have committed to replacing commission pass-throughs from insurance brokers to managing agents to landlords or to freeholders with more transparent fees and fair insurance handling costs. We have been clear that this unreasonable practice must end as a matter of urgency, and I very regularly meet relevant trade associations to make progress on this matter. We have also, penultimately, Mr Deputy Speaker, made good progress with a number of banks in recent months in ensuring that the market in leasehold properties affected by cladding, it starts to become more voluminous again and starts to separate out the challenges of building safety issues from the ability of people to be able to live their lives. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, whether we're talking about safety or the rightful security and freedom that people expect when they buy a home, this government is on the side of leaseholders, protecting and empowering them to challenge unreasonable charges, making it easier and cheaper for them to extend their lease or buy their freehold, and boosting common hold as a flexible alternative to take the housing market into the 21st century. Millions will benefit from these reforms, not just in thousands of pounds saved, but in knowing that the homes they have worked so hard to secure are truly their own in the future.
Thanks very much. 17 members are trying to catch, 18 members are trying to catch my eye. So if we keep to about 7 minutes or so, we want to start the wind-ups no later than 4:10 with 10 minutes each for the front benches. Clive Betts.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister's just given a lot of support and commitment to do something at some stage in the future. Why is it taking so long? I refer to the 2019 Select Committee report. Yes. The committee was actually pleased with the government response. We don't always get positive response from government to our report, but I think we welcomed it, the commitment to do so many things without caveat, and the commitment to look at other further reforms in due course. Give credit to the Leasehold Reform APPG and the Father Houses there. My friend, the member for Ellesmere Park, and we have done a lot of work over the years, and the Select Committee build on that. What I would say to the government is, why is it taking so long? Yes, it is a complicated issue in part to legislate on this, but, you know, in the meantime, it's extremely complicated for leaseholders themselves facing all the obstacles, particularly to buy the freehold of their property. It's not really complicated, it's expensive as well. Look at what could have been done. Leasehold on new houses. It's very simple. Simply ban it. That's not a complicated piece of legislation. The government committed to do it in response to the Select Committee report. Why are we waiting for that 4 years later? That is not complicated at all. We got an agreement from the government as well that we'd have further restrictions on ground rents on new properties. Yes, that was done. Why haven't we got simple legislation as well about service charges and onerous permission rights and other conditions? Why has that not been legislated on? There's been enough work done by the Law Commission and others to inform the government, together with the work of the APPG and the Select Committee, as to how to go about this. Why no progress at all on any of these issues? Enfranchisement. The real frustration that so many leaseholders have in trying to buy their property, I think the Minister dropped out the word Coppan Estates a few minutes ago. Yes, they're in my constituency as well. I can't get a response from them on behalf of my constituents until I write at least 2 recorded delivery letters to a little post box in a grotty property somewhere. That's how they operate. Their intention is not to respond because they keep on getting the ground rents in the meantime. Why are companies like that not being legislated against so people can buy the freehold without having to wait months, in some cases years? And I'm dealing with now constituents on the Flockton estate, none of whom, and there are dozens of them, to get any response from their freehold at all. This is simply unacceptable, and it could have been dealt with. There were concerns raised about the European Convention of Human Rights, the Select Committee, and the right to private property. We actually got very experienced counsel before the committee to explain how this could be done as a matter of the general public interest. So I don't believe there are complications are that difficult that the government can't do it. Why has the government not legislated to give owners of houses or leaseholders of houses the same right to first refusal that the leaseholders in flats have? Again, a simple piece of legislation. Why 4 years later hasn't happened? The number of leaseholders come to me and say, we didn't know our freehold had been sold to another company. It was just done without our knowledge. Why does that happen? The first refusal legislation could have been brought in very easily as well. Now, I accept that flats are more complicated, and existing flats, you've got to get agreement of the existing leaseholders if you want to move towards a common hold system. Yeah. But the process should be simplified. It should be made easier for people, and common hold itself should be made easier. The government's accepted the need to do that, but we haven't made any progress on common hold at all in the last 4 years. There may be some cases where retirement properties, mixed-use properties, are more challenging and more difficult.